person. And Blessing, you can start your thing.
Oh, there he is.
And I will. Now, you know, Donald, hey, I would have let you in earlier, Bob, but you're listed as Donald Duck's sister, an original Bob.
I never would have guessed.
Of all the people.
You're muted, Robert.
That's funny.
Hello, Susan. Nice to see you.
You too, Jim. How are you?
This is good. I like your the view out your window.
Isn't it nice?
Lovely. Must be good to be you. Must live next to Brian.
Well, we used to be 2 miles inland.
Anyway, are we all ready to start?
We
We're
are.
live.
Okay. Hey, do we read the roll?
Sure. I
I
can do
think
that.
sometimes we do and sometimes we don't, but let's do that. Let's make it a
Sure.
habit.
Chairman Quish,
I'm here.
Mr. Sadi,
Present.
Mr. Hirsch,
Present.
Mr. Collegian,
Present.
Mr. Mortimer,
Also present.
Mr. Harris,
Present.
and we also have Mr. Sulkus and myself.
Awesome. So we are back after the call to order roll call. We are looking at the debacle of trying to identifying what we felt was a problem with the I sort of thought it was an arcane, but yes, fairly popular type of regulation on merger. And we changed it as a board, and that came back to bite us, and we opened a barn door. And I guess right now we have two options: close the barn door back to where it was, or close the barn door with a gate that lets people that we originally tried to help in building some wealth for themselves without hurting the neighborhood, without keeping the barn door open. And we've gone around and about it a few times. David, John, have you, and Etan, have you really seen any of the other info that we've done over the last 6 or 8 months?
Mr.
No.
Can I just interrupt for a minute, please?
Oh, yes, please do.
On this particular matter, as I did the last meeting, I'm going to ask to recuse myself. But in order to do so, I need Mr. Sulkus to stop sharing the screen so I can show my video and my sound, and then you would text me when we're back on the meeting. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Quish, but I am
Mr.
recusing
Sadi,
myself.
is that because, Mr. Sadi, does this affect you? Is that why?
That's accurate.
I'm sorry?
I think, and that's fine. I think it probably affects everybody. Either
I know, that's why I'm not sure why he's doing that. I
Yeah,
think this
either
affects
you
everybody.
have property that you think could be more valuable, or you have property next door that you think may become less valuable. So I think everybody in the city has a stake in it, but it's up to you. It's your choice. So I'm not.
And response to Commissioner Hirsch, I do have an interest in it, and it's financial, and I feel that at this point I'm recusing myself. I did previously, so I will mute myself, take the camera off, and you would text me, Mr. Sulkus, when
Yes.
we're back on, and I can participate in the remaining portion of the meeting. Thank you.
And just to clarify, this only affects people who have lots that were created prior to subdivision regulations, so prior to 1929. That's what this issue is about.
Right.
So this,
I would say that's probably, I don't know, 75% of stuff that's south and east of New Haven Ave and the Post Road, and anything near the beach that was developed and, was really what Milford was for 300 years, was a beach community with little teeny lots.
yep, south of Route 1, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so I'd like, can we do it this way? I think to help Mr. Mortar and myself, David, you and I have had some discussions about this, because I know about the issue basic,
Mhm.
but can I sort of frame it in a way that I understand it, and maybe I can explain to John Mortimer?
Sure, and I'll only step in if I think it's not being done. If
Yeah, if I'm going off course, so because John and I are new to this issue.
Sure.
So let me get this straight. Something happened in 1929 vis-a-vis subdivision regulations.
They were created.
All right, so number one, so I can just do it like a timeline. In 1929, subdivision regs were created. All right.
Correct.
What was the effect of those regulations on this issue?
So, as of November 1st, 1929, anytime a parcel of land was created or divided, it was approved by the Planning and Zoning Board. So it was the official recognition by the city that these lots were created. They met standards that were put in place November 1st of 1929. So that's what that did. Anything prior to 1929 didn't require any approvals of any boards, didn't have to meet any standards of any kind. So if you owned a piece of land prior to 1929 and you wanted to cut it up into 10-foot wide strips, which people did, and call those individual parcels, you could.
So if you owned land prior to 1929, you could divide it at your whim.
Prior to 1929, divide it any way you want.
At your leisure.
At your,
All right. So let's do that. So then in 1929, now you need approval by P&Z
right,
to subdivide your land.
right. And it had to meet standards that were in place that actually came around in 1930, which were our zoning regulations.
So, okay. So prior to 1929, if you owned land in the city of Milford, you could divide it at your leisure.
Yep.
Got it.
And
So I just got to go timeline wise.
right.
In 1929, Milford adopted subdivision regulations. The
Yep.
effect is that at any time a parcel of land was created or divided,
Correct.
the creation or division had to be approved by the P&Z board, subject to standards.
Yep. The subdivision standards that were created, correct.
So why are we here today? What has happened since?
Okay.
Why are we here today?
So we're here today because I think it was last year, or now maybe 2 years ago, we had a regulation in the book called 642. And 642 said that if you have any of these 1929 lots and you owned more than one and they were next to each other and they don't meet the current zoning standards, they were automatically merged. And often they were used, and people often didn't even know that they had them. You know, your garage was over there, your house was over here, your lot seemed a little bigger for the neighborhood, but the lots themselves were made up often of multiple small lots. They could have been 25 feet wide, 10 feet wide, 15 feet wide. And so that regulation said that, hey, those are merged, have a nice day.
But doesn't everybody have a lot prior to 1921 because land was found in 1639? So
No.
I don't understand what you mean by a lot prior to 1929. Can you be a little more precise?
A lot before 1929 was a lot that someone owned a piece of land. They created a map and cut it up however they wanted, and they often filed that map at the city clerk's office. There's no standards for the lots they created. It's like, you know,
You have a non-standard lot. There
you have a non-standard lot. Right.
There we go. So don't call it 1929. Let's call it a non-standard lot.
Well, a non-standard lot by today's standards could be any lot that doesn't meet the current zoning standards. That's why we call them pre-1929 lots.
Right.
Because a pre-1929 lot could meet today's standards. They
That's
could
true.
be. They could be large enough.
Let me interject and ask a question, David. When did the zoning map identifying R5, R10, R75, R12.5, when did that map or that come into being? Somewhere between now and 1929, we created zones with standards.
Yeah, we have zoning regulations were created in 1930. And then we had maps that divided the city into different zones. Now, Stephen could probably chime in because
So the current primarily the current designation of where R5 and R75 and R1, that was 1930.
No, I'm not 100% sure of
Oh.
when we started calling them the R5s and R10s. We had early on, because I haven't, Stephen will tell us, we had like residential zones and commercial zones.
Okay,
Stephen,
so
jump on in.
thank you,
So,
Stephen.
okay, so the earliest zoning regulations divided the town up into, R zone, A zone, B zone, D zone, so different residential sizes, and they were all pretty small, from about 2,500 up to about 3,500 or so
Bless you.
feet.
Thank you.
They also had some industrial zones and so forth. As the decades went on, it got more refined. Now, the current, say, R5, R75 and all that, the earliest mention of that is in the late 1950s. That's when there's a major change. So we got,
And when you say mention of that, when you say mention of that, is that when it's codified into
Yes.
zoning regulations?
yes, as you look at the earliest zoning regulations, starting from 1930 and going forward, they're pretty homogeneous up until 1946 or so. Then in the 50s, the nomenclature changes, the zones get bigger, we get more zones, it gets more complex.
So you could fairly say that when we talk about these zones, these lots, and we're calling them pre 1929, they were effectively a legitimate lot no matter what until zoning regulations codified R5 as opposed to R75. So they were legitimate lots up until the 50s when these
No,
lots.
Oh,
No, they were always legitimate lots. But when
Okay,
Milford
okay,
adopted,
so you misunderstood what I was saying. Okay, if in fact in 1940, you didn't identify a particular zone as having a square foot requirement, then none was a non-conforming lot. None were.
prior to the adoption of zoning regulations, there was no such thing as a non-conforming lot. If you had if you had 400 acre parcel of land in 1915, you could divide it up any way you want.
But you're missing my whole question, Stephen. My question is that between 1929 and somewhere in the late 40s or early 50s, before we designated which area had certain size requirements, there was no way to distinguish a conforming or non-conforming lot.
That's not true.
Okay, so explain that to me why that's not true.
The adoption of zoning regulations in 1930 established minimum lot sizes for the different zones throughout the city. Those changed over the decades as zoning became more complex. But starting in 1930, there was such thing as a minimum lot size, and certain uses that could be done on a certain parcel in a certain location.
So when were these lots merged?
lots, well, you're asking when did 642 come in?
Oh, so that's when they were merged, just a couple of years ago?
Well, no, 642 has been around a while. I don't know how long it's been around. But people often merged the lots, sometimes unknowingly, because they would go and buy back prior to 1929. I'm going to buy these 3 lots so I can build my house. These 3 lots are 15 feet wide. I can't put a 15 foot. So they're buying these lots. They put a house on it. They were merged.
Their property, and
They were merged through use, which was then supported by the regulation that was in place, saying, "Hey, if you had these non-conforming lots, they were merged."
Can we find out when that 642 came into effect?
I believe it was sometime in the 1980s.
Okay.
okay.
So I think that that's probably a good point of reference as opposed to 29. I know you're hanging your hat on 29 because it's effectively when
It's because of state statute, Jim, because
no, I understand that, but I do understand that there are definitions and categories of land use that are relevant to this discussion, more accurately reflected by our particular regulation in Milford, which was whatever year you say.
So let me interject for a second. So by state statute, any lot that was created when subdivision regulations were created, so any lot after 1929 that was created, can be developed to the standard of the zone that was in place when that lot was created. And that's by statute, and that's still in effect today. So a lot, whatever you called it, a lot created in 1935, whatever the zoning was in 1935, if it wasn't developed, they could come in today and get a zoning permit to develop it to the standard that was in place in 1935, and that's by state statute. So that's why 1920.
Yeah, but we're not addressing the point of where the issue lies, is that you hung your hat on pre-29.
Yes.
And if the lot was pre-29, then all the rest of the state statute doesn't address the problem that we have.
The problem, because all the problems we have are with lots that are prior to 1929. This is a 1929 and before problem, because what people are, the problem is that people developed those lots or didn't develop those lots. And with the elimination of 642, they're taking their lot that was merged because they had all these multiple lots that had a single house on it. And without 642, they're going back to the pre-1929 maps that are on file at the city clerk's office and saying, hey, these existed prior to 1929, prior to subdivision regulations. Here they are. You don't have a merger regulation anymore. Certifies these as back to the original lots that they were.
Oh.
And that's the issue that's going on.
Right. That's exactly. So that's the problem.
Right.
And so now what we're looking for is a solution.
Yep.
A solution that does not go back to what I feel is draconian way to say, no matter what happened during the, we have probably 60% of the lots within 500 yards of the shoreline are legal non-conforming. So we have an issue here with trying to say that an R5 or R75 or R10 zone needs to be adhered to when every other house within a mile is legal non-conforming. So we're trying to address a situation where people have a situation where they have something that could very well be within the best interest of the neighborhood to have another family next door, but are prevented because of the old merger law. We tried to address that. We opened a door that we didn't want to. Now, if you would put up your PDF of the sort of synopsis you did and give Eaton and John, another minute to review it.
Sure.
See, because you did give kind of a quick 10,000 foot look at why we are here and why we're trying to, I think we're trying to solve a problem, not just go back to a shut door. I hope we are anyway.
Right. Are you seeing it? I'm hoping you're seeing it.
I see your desktop.
Oh, let's try that again, shall we? Okay, sorry about that. Screenshot. Oh, how about now?
Yep.
Okay, we got something now.
Do you have the memo?
Yeah, if you could make it a little bit smaller so you can see a couple paragraphs at once.
Okay, hold on. Is that better?
Can everybody still read it?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll give you a minute to look at that because it's kind of a good overview.
Just let me know when you want it scrolled. I also sent this to everyone individually.
So basically what happened is we had a regulation 6.4.2. This board a couple of years ago removed it, and now we want to sort of bring it back, but in a different manner.
We found that when we eliminated merger, we opened a barn door, and it was the case that developers came in and went and did what they were allowed to do, but it was not within the intent of our changing the law.
Right.
So
right.
So we shut it down twice and put it in a moratorium so we could address it and hopefully find something better than the old way and the real old way and better than the new way or old new way, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
We want a solution, not.
Well, what is the, Jim, I gotta ask, Jim, let me ask you, what do you think, because you were here at that time, 2 years ago. You want to merge these lots? Is that what you want to
No.
merge?
No, I do not. No, I do not. I think that people, I've seen examples in my own family where my aunt had 2 lots and she wanted to have a house on each lot or be able to sell it. There was a volleyball court there at one point, so that they came and said it was merged. She fought for 3 years in court, finally won, and now there's 2 houses on that lot. I've seen other areas where people have had like a basketball hoop or, I exaggerate a little bit, a doghouse on the lot.
Or like a shed, yeah.
And now it's now, 20 years ago, and now it's merged. And yeah, and the image that I like to present is there's a street with 10 houses on one street, 9 houses on the other. They're all the same size lots. Why isn't there a 10th house there? Contributing to the fabric of the neighborhood and to the economics of the city.
So the idea is to put up some guardrails so things don't just go crazy with developers, yet still enable homeowners to generate a little wealth on their property.
Exactly. And within guidelines of the of some guidelines that we create that prevent it from being, it looks like now there's 14 lots on one side and 10 on the other because there were pre-29 lots. So we need to put in some stopgaps. I mean, one could be that we put some parameters for minimum size zone, or we put in, if we put in language that said that does not disrupt the integrity of the neighborhood as determined by the sitting P&Z board, subject to special permit and public hearing or something, so that whatever individual board sits at a given time can look at the application and say, you know what, this is egregious. We don't want 13 on one side with 10 on the other, but on the other hand, 10 and 10 might make sense.
So I don't see anything in this final regulation text that gives authority to the Planning and Zoning Board.
Exactly. Right now, Eton, we're looking at a blank slate. We're looking at crafting language that will, in my hope, my biggest hope is that we shut the barn door that we left open 2 years ago, and we create a new regulation that will accommodate legitimate, what I consider legitimate, valuable applications for individual neighborhoods without getting the 4 lots on what could be normally 2 houses if it was consistent with the neighborhood.
Yeah.
So what if you created a regulation where it says that I don't want to speak out of turn, but I'm new to this, but I do have some experience with drafting statutes.
No, it's all about ideas. That's what we want.
What if, so you want to drop from this final regulation text, you don't want these parcels to be considered a merged undivided lot?
Oh yeah, I want them to be, I don't want them to be automatically merged
By operation of law. Right.
But I also don't want them to be unmerged in a way that disrupts the neighborhood.
So when they fit in with the character of the neighborhood, then that would be okay.
Yeah,
In my mind, yeah, that's exactly what I would hope for.
Planning and zoning boards are the last defense to make sure that it fits a neighborhood. So
yes, but this has come up before, and it seems I guess it's regulation 7.3 or whatever, the character of the neighborhood, and that seems to have no teeth.
Well, it definitely doesn't when we're talking about 830G.
Can I interrupt you guys?
Yes, please do.
Yeah, Brian.
Now, just because I just want to be real clear. My position is very simple. I'm in favor of merger as a matter of law. And I think some of the things that we're talking about philosophically sound terrific. But from an enforcement perspective, I think it's nearly impossible to decide. I'm pretty sure from what I read, the basketball courts, the volleyball courts were never merged. That wasn't a merger. But if you merge these lots by by law. We know what they are. And frankly, if we're going to be the final arbiter and decide what's good for the neighborhood, it has no teeth in front of a judge. That never works. If you just have the simple regulation, there's two lots, they're merged, end of story.
But how did they merge, Brian?
By operation of law.
Exactly.
Explain that to me then.
What are you
Explain to
going
me
to
like
do?
I'm
What are you
five.
going to do now? You're going to go back in time. You're going to have to get aerial photography to see if the guy had a barn there in 1942. It's impossible. Its enforcement is impossible. It's not even difficult. It's literally impossible.
Explain it to me like I'm five. What is merger by law?
If the guy had two lots next to each other, they're now one lot. If he had two lots and he built a house on it, he had a third one, it's now one lot.
You got to be more precise, Brian. You have
That's
two
what they're doing now.
non-conforming.
So the simple thing is with the barn door that we
You have
opened.
two non-conforming lots.
Let me just explain it. The barn door that we opened is simple. Guy had 3 lots. He bought 3 separate lots, and he had 3 lots. If you left them alone and never did a damn thing with them ever, he'd have 3 lots today.
No, he wouldn't.
But he built a house on
They're
it.
not conforming. He's only got a house on one lot.
He's got no house. He never did anything. He's got 3 lots. They're merged.
Okay.
They're
So now
merged.
he's got 3 lots he never developed. He's got 1 lot now.
And they're merged. Exactly. It's
As
so
lo-
simple.
As long as they're non-conforming in terms of their size, then they would be merged, correct?
Right. I'm talking about the little lots at the beach.
Yeah, non-conforming. That's the key for non-conforming.
The
Here's
key.
my problem. Here's my problem with the merger, Brian and Jim. It says according to this, it would be 2 lots. It doesn't say anything in this final regulation text that has to be the same owner.
We have.
Well, hold on, you hear what I said? It doesn't say anything here about being in this final regulation text. It just says if 2 non-conforming lots are.
If you look at the proposed new language, it's right in there.
Where? I'm looking at the final regulation text.
No,
Proposed new regulation.
You're looking at
down.
a memo. You got to look at the text.
But you got to think of it. We have merger right now.
Well, no.
We have merger already. We have merger by use.
Where in the final regulation text does it say it has to be the same owner?
That's in the old regulation. That was in 642, I believe.
Where's the new regulation, proposed new regulation?
It doesn't, I don't think it says it in the last version that we put together. We just said unless previously certified or recognized 2 or more parcels or combination of parcels and portions of parcels that are abut each other and do not comply with zoning requirements regarding lot size with depth shall be considered merged and undivided for the purposes of these regulations.
Nothing about ownership.
Because the assumption is it would only apply if you own the 2 lots.
Whoa. I don't see the word ownership anywhere in that language.
Look in
you're right.
the heading, Eitan, it's in the heading. Use of non.
Headings?
Or
Headings are not.
adjacent land.
Non-conforming lots when applicants are present. Yeah, you're right. Mhm.
Headings don't have force of law. It's a heading. It's not the actual text of the statute.
It tells you what the regulation pertains to.
I'm telling you, I don't think that a heading has operation of law. It's the body of the law, not the heading.
When a judge would look at this, he would say, this is what this regulation is all about.
Brian, what do you think, Brian?
I think Stephen is right on it. It only applies when applicants or predecessor owned adjacent land. We only if they didn't own it, then we don't look at the statute.
I'm gonna see the rule.
But it also says or previously owned by the same owner.
Yes. So if 2 or more lots or portions of lots that are non-conforming were at any time owned by a single entity, then they are merged.
Yeah. And so this comes into neighborhoods that have 80% legal non-conforming. For me, it's egregious. And I think we have an obligation or an opportunity anyway, not an obligation, an opportunity to make it better. Because there is a case that if you go in and you take what's now legal non-conforming because there's already a house on it and go back to this draconian, they're all merged. Well, if they're merged now, they were merged 10 years ago. And if they're merged now, they were merged 20 years ago. And if they were merged now, they were merged in 1930. So let's go start tearing people's houses down.
There's no merger rule unless there's a merger rule in the zoning regulations. Right now, we have no merger rule, so people are taking advantage of the pre-1929 lots. If there's 2 or 3 of them, and there's a one house on them, they can knock the house down and build 2 or 3 houses.
This really doesn't affect anyone's house as it is now, Jim. It doesn't affect your house.
But wait a minute, why, but if I have more lots I don't want merged, why can't I just transfer one of them to an LLC? So I, Eitan Hirsch, own parcel A, and Hirsch LLC owns parcel B. Those are different owners.
But they're starting from a single ownership. If you have 2 lots that are under common ownership anytime, and there's a merger rule, you cannot divest those lots. That's the whole purpose of the merger rule. So
That's what I'm trying to prevent, Stephen.
There's 3 choices before the board. 1, merger by use, which is what the old 642 was.
Yeah.
Option 2 is merger by operation of law. Option 3 is no merger rule. There's no way you can split a baby and say a lot of, either we say a lot of a certain size we recognize as a legal lot of record, regardless of its size. We can't say you can only use 85% of it because we think it's too small. So you either have merger by use, merger by operation of law, or no merger.
Merger by intent.
Yeah, but I think that Jim is against merger, and I think Brian is for merger. So we have 2 people here that have diametrically opposed views.
That's not the first time that's happened.
Oh, but the problem is we've got a deadline. We got February 28, 2023. We have a deadline.
Yeah, but we've extended this deadline before.
Yeah, and I was the only one that voted, and I voted against that.
I know you did, and I appreciate that because you're concerned about getting it done. But right now, what we have is, and again, I feel really badly about the fact that what we were trying to do some good and we did some harm, and I feel like I spearheaded that, and so I regret what I did, and I wish I had done it better. I wish I had better advice all around when we did this, but we did it anyway, and I'm trying to correct it. And I'm trying to get your help in correcting it, collective help. And I think that we do have a problem if we have a situation where there is kind of an arbitrary, no, you can't do it thing going on. I think it hurts the citizens of Milford and it hurts us collectively. I don't have every time I come up with an idea, somebody's got 2 or 3 ways to shoot it down. So
it's that kind of problem.
Life in the drawer either. So I would say I would not mind following the path we did and actually got accolades for in putting another subcommittee hearing down the road. Maybe not in the next couple of weeks. Maybe we kick this can down the road. I know you don't like that too much, Brian. But and then we have a public information session or public participation session with regard to merger, the same way we did it with the ADUs, and have it be an opportunity for the community. And if nobody steps in and cares about it, then fine. If we go back to the way that I think sucks, I think that'll suck for me. But you know what? It's not the end of the day. It's not my committee, not my board. I'm just one voice. So whatever happens, happens. But I think that we don't have, we don't even need to, I don't know, we could ask staff about this. We could have the whole board sit with an information set, a public hearing with the whole board, not just our committee, and just have the public invited to give their opinion on merger. And we can have, I'm sure we'll get some local developers, some local attorneys. It's not like there's wouldn't be an application in front of us for specific language on zone change. We just have a public engagement session about this and see what other people think. Because I could be wrong.
Has the city lawyer voiced an opinion on this? Should we kick it to him to get an opinion?
John,
this is no, because the policy issue. This is policy. This has nothing to do with
No.
This is policy. Let me ask you a question, David Sulkis, and maybe Steve Harris. let's talk about economics. What is the best economic outcome for this issue of merger of non-conforming lots? In other words, what would be the net economic benefit for or against merger by operation of law?
Well, I mean, the only thing that would come to my mind is if we didn't have a merger regulation,
Yeah.
and you would have the ability, or a developer would have the ability to build more, increase density. So with increased density, it's a double-edged sword. So you build an extra structure, which obviously has tax implications. You get more tax dollars for that, but at the same time, you may have an increase in the need for city services. Those houses may add some kids to the school system, may use emergency services. It's just like any other additional single family home. The only way to get it, and it's hard to estimate how many properties would come into being that aren't there now. That's a hard number to try to figure out, because I don't even know that we'd be able to scour the city clerks, the thousands of maps they have, to look at the lots that could potentially that have single family homes on them now, who decide, we'll put two houses instead of one. To come up with that the increase in the number of houses. I don't know that we could do that. So that's a really difficult question. Other than what benefit does each individual single family home add or use for the city? And then just take that number and.
I think that Brian, just my opinion, I think Brian is correct. I think merger by operation of law is simple. On the other hand, you take away power of this board to act in a fashion that could be consistent with the neighborhood. So I'm not sure we as a board want to give up that much control and authority.
You need to have, if you're thinking about having this within the board's realm, then you need to have standards, whatever those standards are, because you can't have a regulation that is based on, we just think that, we like you, we like what you're doing, that's going to be good for the neighborhood, versus, yours, that's not good for the neighborhood. What are the standards that you're using to measure that goodness with, or that benefit?
That's the problem I see. We'd have to look at different parcels, different neighborhoods, and say, this neighborhood can have X amount of houses, and this neighborhood can have Y. And
keep in mind that the dividing line between all the zones, 99% of the time, is a street. So you could very well go down any street and go, wow, this side of the street looks one way and the other side of the street looks a different way. It's because they're two different zones, because the streets are used as the dividing lines between the zones.
The plaintiff's lawyers call that arbitrary and capricious.
Yes, we do.
Only when it's the other guy's client.
Well, plaintiff, I'm not a plaintiff lawyer.
I will say, though, that the one benefit of merger by operation of law is that you have that standard.
Right.
That gives you a standard.
It's simple. And then, the old regulation was what, Brian described. Okay, prove to us you didn't use the lot, and we have to go look at aerial photos from wherever, from
that's
the 40s.
unreasonable.
And
That's not reasonable.
And it wasn't reasonable for anybody.
Yeah, I mean, whatever. I just think that we have an issue where we have a very large percentage of our city is comprised of legal non-conforming lots. So
I hear you.
You're right, Jim. You're right, especially by the water. You're right.
yeah. So merger by law says that you people who are legal non-conforming have a better access to the economy than someone else who did not.
Can we come up with a minimum that we can split these lots? And
yeah, I don't know, but at any rate, we do have some more time if we want to do it. And I feel badly that I'm obviously frustrated, and I don't have an answer. I have ideas, and they all seem to hit the same brick wall, and so that is that could be the case that it happens all the way till the end of whatever happens here, and I'll just end up, whatever, no big deal. But I think that our discussions here are, I think we're sort of at a wall, and I know I am. But I think that if we agree to bring it to a public input session, either with just the subcommittee or with the whole board, I would be for that, and let the chips, roll the dice with that and see if anybody has good ideas that actually could work. I have ideas that I guess can't work, and that's okay. I don't have all the ideas, or all the right ones anyway. But if we get some more input, I'd be. I mean, if you don't want to do that, we can do whatever you guys decide. But bring it to the board.
I would, excuse me, Jimmy. I would, I think that I'll defer to staff on legality and all that stuff. But I think getting more input on this, if we can do it quick, let's do it. I mean, just more voices, and we'll see who comes out. Everybody comes out.
Brian, then are you referring to having, so for example, we have our next meeting with the whole board is January 17th. Are you proposing public hearing and public comment on?
I don't know if we can do something. This is why I defer the legality of it. I don't know. I would prefer something less formal.
So you think having public input with the subcommittee?
Yeah, something like that. I invite everybody, and people will come. That Milford organization, whatever they'll bring some bodies.
Okay, I'm in with that.
Okay, so
I'd like to see.
Those also are the people. If you look at who shows up at the meetings, and you kind of know where they live. It's funny for me to sit there and listen to us before everybody understood the intricacies of 830G. Everybody screamed and yelled about density. And some of the folks that come in favor of increasing density at the last meeting, and what I think is to be a future meeting, are people that live in these neighborhoods that don't want any more houses, that they think it's too dense already. So it'll be interesting to see what comes. But I think if we can do it without the formality of having something on the agenda, but an informational thing, I would be for that.
Okay.
We can schedule a public information meeting of the subcommittee, because we've done that before, and have public input and advertise it as such.
I would send it to the usual suspect lawyers and developers. Kevin Crusadey and Tom Lynch, those enough.
Okay, cool. Let's pick a date. Do you want to do it 2 weeks from today, which would be again,
Let's take a look.
it would be at the end of the month, before our regularly scheduled meeting and after our POCD.
So two weeks from today would be the day after our next regularly scheduled meeting.
Oh, it would be the 18th.
It'd be the 18th, yeah. And we're having a meeting on the 11th, because I've got to put that together tomorrow.
Well, you guys tell me when you're available. I'll make myself available.
How about next week, 7 p.m.?
Next week, 7. Well, Stephen has a conflict because he's got his zoning board of appeals meeting on Tuesday.
Oh yeah,
on Tuesday, and then
Wednesday.
Well, so we can do it Wednesday, but then we wouldn't have the POCD meeting Wednesday. We'd do this one instead.
No, I want POCD. We got to get that. So whatever the week after POCD.
Okay, then that brings it to the 18th.
fine.
Good with me.
Okay.
Done.
Okay, then we'll schedule it for the 18th. We'll have a public information session on this and gather public input.
Okay, well, thank you. Let's get Sadie back in and tell him that his presence wasn't missed.
He's never heard that before.
Come on in, come back. Come back. Okay, I sent him the message. Let's see.
Waiting with bated breath.
And there he is. He just has to unmute himself.
And you can get rid of your screen share.
Sorry about that.
Mr. Sadie, we had a very quiet and mild-mannered meeting. Very zen-like, actually.
Zen, I like that. Yes, definitely Zen.
But we decided that we will have a public information session similar to what we did as a subcommittee with the ADU issue. We're gonna do a similar thing with the merger issue, and that will be on what date?
That will be the 18th, Wednesday, the 18th.
Okay, Wednesday, the 18th. And is there any other business for us here? Do we have minutes to approve, or do we have?
I got an issue.
Yes, Mr. Eaton.
All right, so we have in 13 days, we're going back to vote on the ADUs. Are we gonna have any further discussion about provisions or proposals that were discussed about parking spaces tonight?
Okay, so that is a public hearing that is currently open. This committee cannot discuss it. This
Yes,
committee,
not on our agenda. It'll only be for the full board in public hearing that we'll discuss that.
that's, yeah, and if the full board decides, oh, well, we want this rewritten, or we want something changed, and they want to kick it down to staff to do, or take it and kick it back to the subcommittee, that can be done. But right now, you can't have a discussion about it because the public hearing is open. Any discussions about it have to be done at that public hearing.
All right.
So then what was the purpose of kicking it down the can for 2 weeks?
Because we're all going to discuss, we all have time to read all the emails. We have just time to consider our own feelings about parking and about density, whatever issues are raised in what we heard out loud or what we read from what was submitted by the public. And then the public hearing is still open. So if those inquiries or statements made by the public in those 26 emails, or when we review the testimony online that people gave, if that brings up questions for us in our own minds, we're able to address them in full public hearing. And then the full board can either decide to vote on it, decide to make the minimus changes, or just vote on it. Yeah.
Thanks, Jim.
Very good description, Jim.
That was great. Thank you, Jim.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
So we have do we have minutes to? We don't do that, do we?
It's an agenda
I get so confused.
proposal for new minutes, new emotions, whatever.
I
I'm
second.
looking at the agenda right now. I have nothing to propose or mention. Is that part of the agenda? And I'll wait till Mr. Mortar makes a motion on the minutes.
Move to approve the minutes.
Second.
Mr. Hirsch gonna second it?
Okay, in favor?
Aye.
Nobody opposed. Thank you, Susan. Good to see you. Thank you, everybody, for listening to my diatribe and sharing your thoughts.
Thanks, Jim.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Good
Have a
night.
good evening, everyone.
Bye.
See you next week.
Bye.